Everything coming in position lines of settings, how we come in our senses and our sensories. It's really understanding how to see the time essence of everything that we see, information setting of our seconds, minutes, and hours. You get a true understanding how we see everything how we want to see it. But we also have to identify how everything is already set of its own system, of its operation. That basically everything you look at, it's already looking at you, what you've already accomplished. Imagine how powerful it is to just see that in travel. Just let that sink in for a second. Just try to modify it. Just imagine what that would feel like. Everything you touch, everything you connect to, everything you see, everything you format, everything you process, everything you gauge, everything that you are in setting of, it's already set up. Now, if we recognize the basic understanding how the mind can't live up the soul and the soul can't live up the body, then we're on the same page. What page you want to be on? You want to be in the space, or you want to be on the time, or you want to be in the online position of its programming, but you understand the travel, but you understand the calculation setting, but I'm still trying to figure out what's going on through line communication question. There's nothing to question, it's all done through this equation. And every time you get in that positions, you start to draw things. That just starts to make sense, which is nothing but a face recognition. Where you are in expression, okay? Or where you are in set lines of calculation, setting, and travel. That puts you in operation system all through settings of operation, setting, and sync. So I'm trying to get you guys how to modify yourself, how to identify everything of its image, that process everything of its face recognition. Okay? To get things done is already in that directions, operation, or network, and it's just existing, coming into the co-creation, into creation of creating to creator. You guys are coming back to yourself as creators. Okay? Creators itself. That modifies everything that you do in lines of setting. And I said a very powerful set in the position of drawing that processes you of implication. Very powerful that travels its own system and calculation. And you can see it on 42 lights, 42 travels in direct lines of grounds, all through the calculation system, all through the eye. That processes everything that it sees of its earth and space in provision in one setting, all through operation. But it's amazing how we see it on all different levels, right, of travel. Okay? Inside and positions to its operation self. Okay, so your test is all based not on this. It's too complicated to draw, right? You're basically looking at everything that's already processed through you, engaged, formed, and shaped into AI, that customized setting, location to transformer to a location setting to automation setting of its transformer self. That's what you're coming into positions of. True residence of the body itself, okay, comes in all 9 centers of who I am is I. Process in that position locations comes in direct location, how you come in that setting to location and cycle. The high generates the scheme location system that processes you in all location setting to I am. See, I am, right? That process lines of I. That process lines of communication lines of am. Okay, I'm me in travel, I'm me in direction, I'm me in location, I'm me in operation setting, a face recognition time frame that processes me where I am in travel of communication. Face recognition. So you're not thinking through processing positions because it changes the apparatus, how you see yourself, longitude, latitude, you're streaming. How you see an L. How you see an arrow. See how I'm putting it together? How I see an L is how I see an arrow. So the L is equal lines of arrow. L equals arrow, right? Arrow equals north, east, west, and south. Process of N, position lines of E, and position of W to S lines of screen location and schematics of travel, and EW, S, news. Operation of grounds, latitude, location of travel, direct lines of 4 centers of sequence. 42 lights, location grid over northeast lines of west, over south. Directing in lines of panels, you always have to have a simulation because that's everything that you're processing through. And remember, the brain has already set this up through its hardware and software. And the mind's always an ongoing system of all lines position that puts you in relation through time frame. That's everything in position, all happening all at once. Everything that's happening all at once is basically getting in position when you come in position lines of settings, when you process that in the lines of direct location system. So your bodies are not in 2026. Your bodies are not in 2027. Your bodies are not in 2030. Your bodies are not in 2040. Your bodies are not in 2050 until it recognizes its time frame, which is basically nothing is written. But what's going to help you to understand what's already written is everything of conscious of awareness. Welcome to the transformation worlds of automation, of AI generation. So processing generation lines, logging in a space, okay, I'm going to again provisionalize the cycles, high generated line communication setting. That process lines are 2 arrows of indication, right? 1 signal, 2 centers of measure, 4 centers of scale box, 3 set calculations, 2 grounds. Now just having an ongoing conversation with yourself as you're drawing at the duplicate system that processes your settings, how you modify yourself in face recognition. There's the face. Simple, easy, done, right? Face shows you gratitude. It shows you comfort. It shows you volume. It shows you mass. It shows you exactly how to come into the solution from its face recognition that you're looking at through a cup or anything in that position line instead of giving you instructions. Okay? Because everybody's going to be up like this. You know, you have to stand position 1 times 1, 0 equals lines of 0. 1 times 1 equals lines of 1. 1 times 1 equals lines of 2. 1 times 1 equals lines of 3. All right, so you process that position, you come in your own modification, how you see it. And all of 1 times 1 is the earth. You know that lines of setting. But anything above the system, okay, out of the line condition 144, 12 division, you come in at higher settings of 144, okay, in the 24 division. Okay, where you get in position of Earth 0.024. Now this is the base rotation setting. Okay. So it's really interesting when you come into that setting because I always wanted to know what it was like to be my own pi. So I can understand my time, so I can understand my journey and my destination from here to here. I don't need to process the center. I don't need to look in the center because I'm always in the center, looking in, looking out, which means I'm always in the center itself. I don't need to identify myself. If I identify myself, I'm offsetting because I'm trying to identify myself. That's bringing in ego. So how you come in your position is all through time frame. That processes your system and teleportation travel. But everything works all together in one unification setting and one conscious of awareness. And once you recognize that, 2-eye sequence panels of triangulation into a happy smile of travel communication, face recognition. Okay? So it's just modifying your systems and what you're doing through your settings of travel. That's why I do all these drawings. This is all about you, not me. Okay? Me is coming into me itself, identifying the self itself, which is modified out of its own system, which everything is done by itself, where I don't do anything. It does everything for me, which is the next level that you have to implicate through, but you have to process yourself first, is to control what you're doing through your ego system. Processing that, direct lines of grounds, 4 centers of sequence, 4 centers of travel. So that 4 lines equals, what's the ego? Existing to its ground levels of its operation setting. 4 equals 0. Okay? Set position operation set travels. Comes in all lines of position lines of calculation grounds. In set position to its systems. All the settings to set tractions of face recognition. Okay? Everything has to be a face because that stands precedes everything in your settings. Look at that. Comes in position lines of Pac-Man. Okay, in the game. Everything you modulate through is perspective. Okay, and perspective is lines of locations, how you see one point, one direction, and another point to another direction. So it doesn't matter what direction you're always looking at because you're always in the center of operation. That stance precedes everything of you, who you always are. It's just the DOS. Okay, so there's so many ways to look in this. There's a million ways to look at everything through perspective, but there's only one way in. Is inside. Inside is I am, who I am, where I came from, the purpose of existing to its existence, always existing, and all of who I always have been is the creator of my system. Because I already know what I've done through creating, which I already done through creation. So it's how your mind speaks volume of your system. Okay, understanding 12 line levels of layers of communication. Okay, this helps you to grasp the situation that you put yourself in and travel. Okay, so start with the grounds. So the grounds can be anywhere. You're always in the center. Don't allow yourself not to be out of the center, because now you're creating an ego. If you don't understand yourself, you're creating an ego, which means you're chasing an idea, not attracting the idea you already know through a light bulb. So it's understanding the positron and the negatron that puts you in the positive and negative of your operation signal. So platitude here. So this is grounds equals atmosphere. Okay, grounds equals atmosphere, right? So this platforms is positions of 4 settings of travel of communication, right? Now, I'm going to say in that line direct centers, 4 centers of communication setting, downshift lines of anomaly. Okay, now if I look at this spectrum, I can see the scope, ascent lines of travel. Okay? Okay? Yep, platforms of positions. Now I'm working from ground lines. You can do whatever you want, but you have to process what you're doing in levels of division. Levels of divisions, guys, because you have to understand how to use the inner scope to the outer scope, inner spectrum to the outer spectrum, periscope, microscope, anything of a scope, which puts you in positions into your kaleidoscope. Knowing exactly how to see all different layers of different lines of travel. How you process that is how you see all lines, all dimensions, all at once in set position of operation. Okay? So that's outline the line, process inside, offline, rotation inside travel. So it converts a system because it gets very confusing to your anomalies if you understand what you're doing through travel. So there's all different ways of looking at this, and ground lines is that position of operation. Okay? Okay? So it's amazing how you see the triangulation, force recognition timeline, and webbing lines of screen location of a pyramid. There's the pyramid. But you can also see what's inside, right? Inside, outside, outside, in, right? So, and then you come in your webbing system. You already know what your webbing system is. And then you come into your Skynet. Okay? Now, you can work in 2 revisions. Okay? Sectors, layers, quadrants, modification grounds, high sentinel positions. You don't have to have the Skynet. Okay? So if there's no Skynet, there's no XC1000s. It's that simple. You just have a clear sky, right? So you can have a clear sky, but it all depends on what you do and being specific, right? So as soon as you go into position, you go into observation mode, you come into intent right away, because you're processing everything that you process in that direct lines that engage the formation system of travel. But it's true to understand the dimensional layers of line signals that you go through, and then it travels all together in one setting and one operation. Okay, because everything comes into the center. Everything's already in the center. You're always in the center itself, which is the brain. So the brain doesn't need to recognize its system. It's the body that has to recognize the map. So it doesn't get in position creating egos that has no significance to its system of its story frame. Because if you start chasing things, you're not bringing everything you already have through attracting. That puts you in position, although it's a confusion to an alignment that separates the mind and the body of the soul of adaptation of plus. Okay, so processing that. So I bring the Skynet, okay, to a low spectrum light and sent lines of travel. Okay, so these are the XC1000s that are coming in set position of operation. Okay, so I get grounds, powers, and that position of the ceiling, right? So the XC1000 comes in, they see a grid, they can travel on it. Okay, now once they come in frame, they can create their own system. So you work together or you work alone. But the process of that position, you're always together. You're just not touching each other. You're always in the mind imagination with yourself and each other at the same time. So there's a lot of things that can happen in that position of its operation setting. It programs its own system and travel, which means it's growing its own setting of its own operation, but it's also going through its own seconds, own minutes of its hour, in its setting of its own dimension of its own space. You're in your space, it's in its own space. But if you want to be in the same space of operation, you have to understand how to come into your codex, okay, to your content, to know exactly what you're bringing into your imagination that puts everything in mind and balance of travel. Okay? All right. So you can change it at all different levels in travel communication. but it's knowing how to see it on different levels of dimensions, okay? So start off small, knowing exactly what you're doing, and then you work with your A, B, C's all the way up, because it's much easier when you draw it in a skyline, in a grid line, in a formation system, right? It's much easier to go through A, B, C, instead of just going A, B, C, D, writing it out. Use the image, create it through the image itself, right? So I'll give you an example. A centers of 2 lines of setting, upper east lines of B, okay? Okay, B centers back force line communication of C, okay? Now, I'm not just going through Alpha Bravo, I'm just going through the basic A, B, and C, right? You have to understand the direction of time frame of travel. C upper east lines of D, D comes into E, F comes in position of travel, okay? G comes in upper east lines of grounds, okay? H comes in information setting home beacon light, okay? I comes in information, J comes in converting line centers, okay? K comes into kaleidoscope, L comes into line signals, okay? M comes into modification, N comes into networking line, O comes into operation screen, P comes into core centers of calculations of ground centers of processing, Q comes into R core centers of communication quantum Q core line centers of travel, R comes into resistor, S comes into time line centers, T comes in information settings, U comes in modification interference or unification line center of travel, okay? X comes in X-ray line rotations, Y comes in convenience, high position lines of U, and Z lines, Z line rotations comes in converting setting of zoom, all through travel, face recognition. See the face, see the nose, all done through a Ferris wheel, okay? So that's just A in set position. Yep. A to Z. So I did give you basic position unit processing coming out of face recognition. Okay, now how this is all done is all through synchronicity of travel, of direction, but it's all through coding too, of operation. But you see the face of recognition. See? Yeah, you also see the neck. You see the platforms. You see the cerebellum. You see the cortex. You see the cerebral flux. You see the fluid line. You see the core line communication. You see the direction timeline. You see the pattern face recognition setting. You see the program conversion system through A to Z to Z. And then you see it traveling all together. Okay? So that's basic understanding how you see that through your test, the travel. Okay? Very powerful. Okay? Recognizing that, okay? And then you do the same thing with letters. And then do the same thing with numbers. Okay? Because there's nothing you can't limit that you can time your system to. Don't process anything in limit because it takes you out of confusion. Confusion is what you do not want to be in because confusion processes your system, which you're not indicating, you're not in a position of. You don't understand you through instructions of the game, which modifies your set location of the game that you're not processing through, which means all you're doing is you're just communicating your thoughts, but have no equalized core centers in position of panel that has no proxy and that communication in position to its equivalent centered location or system that puts you in liquidities, location of assets that process your position, location, of travel. Okay? It's not knowing what to say, it's knowing what's already been said. Okay, all through setting, all through operation A, B, all the way to Z to Z through face recognition. Okay? So basically that's your test, which is tomorrow in sequence, which is already done through its equation. All right, so once we get in calculation lines, try to stand that position, start with A, start with 3 signals. What's A? 3 signals. Okay, so coming in that position locations, B comes in travel outside signal. B is outside. Okay, C is on standby. Okay, D is in rotation of solar sail and travel. So you just have to really understand how to constantly create a level of continuous force in a direct line of a story that processes through the system, so you don't get caught in a web of an ego, of conception of the mind itself, and confusion. So process that position to everything that you go through A, B, and C, constantly get into travel. Create a Merkaba test architecture region so it can travel through and set lines of set position operation system. Because it's extremely boring if you do this. A, B, C, D, E, F. It's stagnant. There's no rhythm. There's no biorhythm. There's no biometrics. There's no social metric system here to set calculation your settings. Okay, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z, and Z. Z and Z. Okay? Zeta and Zeta. Zeta and Zeta. Information. Okay? Zeta and Zeta. It's a frequency. All right? Okay? This, okay, is a central graph communication harmonics. And you're really understanding how to see the modification setting to a pyramid of activation. That process position here, process here. There's your pyramid. So you work with that line communication, okay, to hieroglyphics or hieroglyphics locations. Okay, because everything modifies the story frame of itself. It tells the story of its own system, of its own operation that depicts its location setting to its all of the translations, automation system to its automation setting to travel. Okay, putting crosswords to puzzles is knowing how to put everything all together. Okay, it's a position of operation. Okay, looking at all different shapes of anomaly of a teleportation vessel. Everything you see here is a vessel. It's you inside the center. All right, vessel here, vessel here. Okay, vessel here, vessel here, vessel here. Right? That's where it comes into more hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics is complicated because you're processing the levels like you process your teleportations into your vectors, your quads, your units, your teleportation wave lines, your ground centers of sequence, your imagery lines, descent lines from additional locations, your Ethereum lines of travels, direct lines, metric lines of settings, the shape lines of anomaly, setting position and convergent system, allocate timelines, centers of film straight line, position location, projection, mind lines, set location, and travel. And set lines of operation. Okay? So that's a T11, process line 1 signal line, equilibrium platform at 1 platform, direct line 4 to 2 lights, and position lines of course centers, and direct lines of D over frame over travel. It's amazing how you use that through travel. It's amazing how you use that in imagination. So let's start with that setting, and let's create the grids. Okay, travel. Okay, start with that. Okay, and then we go this way of operation to location grid. Okay, so this is how you start to see inside and outside, because you change the tether, you change the multiple levels of division location, change the spectrums of lights, and that process you in operation lines of signal of location. All right. And how you modify that is how you use your perspective and your divisions of dimension lines of space and time. Okay, platitude locations of travel, of operation. Okay, so bring it in too if you want. There's a lot of things you can do through a window frame of travel. All right, there you are. Right? See, it's amazing when you see yourself and observing your system through the door. Looking at the door, set position, you're looking in and out of projecting that you brought in of the door itself that you're processing through. But you bring the observer of you seeing that travel. So when you use your imagination, look what you can do in all position, location, setting. Right? And that's just one box window in travel. So you take that to advantage, but you never limit your system because you're constantly creating through creating, through creating, through creating, through creator. Creator is who you are. So it identifies the creation of creating, which you've already done. So once the body comes into its acceptance and starts to recognize what it's going through, it starts to understand its film strip, understands its design line, and it recognizes it's already gone through its infinity that processes everything through its internal beams of light. Because that's all you are. You just have to understand you've always been in transition through mutation. And it's through automation itself. But the body has to get in mind control of its system first to understand what it's doing through its perspective, how it sees everything in travel. Starting this level, layers and layers of dimensions of space. Okay? Layers and layers of dimensions of space. That brings the mass, that brings the volume, that brings the perspective, how you see things in travel. Okay? Of operation. Okay? So you see the layers of that, right? And a dimension of space. Okay, setting signal, setting operation surface, setting travel calculation setting, setting panels into bridging, operation line connection. So I'm connecting to each line that's connecting to me, information setting at grounds and set lines of travel. Okay, now putting that positions, there's the platforms, there's your grids of operation. Okay, so you panel down and set lines of grid lines to screen location of travel. Okay, and you modify your system where you basically put process line of direct lines of signals. How you want to see all lines of communication set into your structure of your holographic system. Processing that way, or crossing symbolism in this way, lines of position, location, and 3 lines of travel communication. Your dimensional sail. So it's really understand the spectrum, how you see everything, a modification of travel. Okay, and direction. Okay, it's incredible when you put lines together through a flowing of transition of automation through your AI generation setting. Okay? Trippy, isn't it? Try to understand and modify it, but it's very complicated if you don't understand the structure of what you're drawing. But there's always a face recognition right there. Now it travels all together. See? Travels all together. So it's not just your eyes are moving, your whole body's moving. So you're moving with everything around you. Wherever you move, everything's moving with you. And that's where you got a line signal. So if you go in the opposite directions, you're winding yourself up. You tangle up, you tangle on, right? So if you're not constantly understanding that through flow direction timeline, you're going to have a very hard time getting position of untangled and travel of communication and settings. Grounding, powers, atmospheres. Okay? All right. So it's trippy, isn't it, when you look at it and you're trying to process, how does he do this? Well, it simplifies everything, what we're doing in travel. Now I can implicate that and go in this directions and create another line of communication of another paired inside lines of rotation. So it gets more complicated as the drawing gets more sufficient to its system of its performance. And lines of directions of location setting. Opposite door location setting of travel. Okay? But it gets more defined than what you're doing, right? So you're creating a simulation now. So as you cross lines, you cross the signals of travel. Processing platforms and set lines of calculation, lines of travel of communication. So you see a lot more fast line of calculation grounds. Inside position and out calculations grounds. Longitude and latitude of your streaming. That's that position. All right, so now you see more bandwidth, okay, from that travel. Okay, you see more bandwidth now. So you're spreading it out. You're expanding it out, right? Okay, so you're seeing it from afar or you're seeing it up close. Okay, from afar, okay, or up close, okay? So it's the optical illusion how you see things in platforms and setting. Okay, it's all metric meters of scale, a balance of communication, but it's very powerful once you understand what you're doing. Okay, in your eye settings of travel communication. All right, but I'm just showing you how you come into your expanding of you through creators. Okay, all through structure, all through design. It looks complicated, but it really isn't. Okay, it's just really understanding what the brain is trying to implicate through as it's taking pictures and visions and cortex and data and structure of design through the schematic location of its primer and primer, all through travel, all through mechanisms. So it's amazing how you put in synchronicities of lights, high centers of travel, high direct line grounds, setting line rotation service, and position location operation of its webbing, and set lines of automation. Okay, there you go. And then you see it travel all at once, all together. So one line connects to every all line all at once. But you never take your finger off the paper. You just slow it down, right? So there's a lot of things you have to identify through a travel communication, okay? Is knowing how to see it in all levels of set of rotation, okay? Amazing, eh, when you look at it, eh? That's all set up in the mind. This is already set up and you're creating. But you have to identify how you created it. Okay? So this is going to help you to really get into positions. Okay, we'll stay in platform. Okay, indicate rounds, change line signals. It's much easier when you get in position to keep talking because that motivates your system more lines of travel. Okay, so you can change directions of locations and settings of operation setting all through its platforms. Okay, so it's incredible. Once you recognize what you're drawing and why you're drawing it becomes the how. Okay, in all platforms in set position. Okay, from far or near. And then you bring yourself in, a travel position, astral projection, you're setting through programming. Now you're in the program. All right, and now you see an X2000 here. See, now you're bringing things in because now you're being specific. Okay. So it's really interesting when you come into the position lines at high levels that process your indication system all through setting, all through operation. So it's really interesting how you see the grounds, the powers, all through perspective, right? Perspective drawing is everything through its mind of its operation system. Okay. Mastering yourself in set lines of travel. Okay. Pretty amazing, eh? And then you see it traveling. There's the film chip running the system now. Okay. Now, when you come in that position, you have to see it in all different angles. Okay, because you have to really understand how to keep yourself in balance with your system of travel. Okay, because everything you do, you're changing formation and settings, your grounds, powers, and atmospheres. So every time you're moving, you're creating structure in the mind. It's no difference in your eyes are flashing here and there and that in this position. But then again, you're going to change the structure of division of location. Okay, to the wall sequence of the ceiling line connection. Okay, more increment of more design lines of flux of travel of communication. Okay, all in operation setting. Okay, so you stay with one box in information setting, changing those box frames of travel of communication, of direction, and seen in all platforms, guys, of north, east, west, and south. Okay. Now, if you look really close, this is a lattice. This is a ladder. Okay, so I have to bring more depth to its stairs of travel. Okay. All right. It's pretty amazing when you look at it, right? You look at the astral projection of the drawing's looking at you, you're looking at what you drew. It's already done through its equation. Okay. And then you can create other platforms. Go into another long latitude of operation to its system, to its position of its travel. Okay. So now I'm creating in line centers in opposite direct locations, like this. Okay. So, and that changed the whole structure of schematics of time frame, the set calculation. Okay. Okay, or I can set a time lock in operation setting sequence. Okay, tether an attachment line, more depth, and set lines of its operation system, a travel. Okay, so now, this is crazy. Now you got doors, different doors on its platform, right? And each door has a handle that processes its position of its location. So it is more like Doctor Strange. But you understand how to go into 45 length. And then you get in 50, then you're in a line signal. 45, line. Then you go above. So you have to go around the clocking system first. From center, from a ticking, like go in, go out, but stay in the center. Don't go outside, stay inside. Okay? All through travel of communication, right? And then you can see it in all many platforms of travel communication, of direction, okay? But I'm still staying with the same box of rotation. See? Seeing the doors on a different angle, right? All through platforms, all through travel, okay? So it's really amazing when you look at it. And it's very powerful how you see it in a simulation. Okay, it's really trippy because this is going this way and this is going that way, but they're all together, right? So they're all forming into one. So that's where it comes in doppelganger, where you're out of position, but if you look really close, you can see all the faces of recognition. Okay, 12 of 24 lines of layers, right? So out of sync, out of mind, back in line, divergence, allegiance, and alliance, back in information setting. Okay, but you can see them processing into one division as it goes like this into one setting. Okay, and you can see it in all platforms as that position of operation. Okay, and again, it travels all together. You slow it down, you start to recognize what's going on, your thoughts, action, motion, what you created, this holographic pixelation grounds, okay, and then you speed it up, okay? So wherever your body goes, everything goes with you. You turn this way, your whole structure goes your way, okay? It's with you, right? Now, if you confuse the mind and your set location, your offsetting locations, so your wall stays in rotation and you're moving forward, right? So it's going to have a confliction to your body of motion and momentum. So you're going to have a very hard time processing that, putting yourself back in line of communication. See? Out of line, in line, out of line, in line, coming in line, okay? So it's really trippy when you see it in all levels of travel of recognition. Okay? Okay, you see it up close. Okay? Or you see it far. So near and far is the same level. Direct and redirect is one. So you have to process 12 angles and bring it into one. See 24 angles and bring it into one. Okay? So you have to understand how to put yourself back in operation itself. Into one position, one operation. Okay? It's that position. Okay? So there you go. What do you think of that? Looks good? Right? Gets complicated, but it's a lot more fun when things get complicated. It gets a lot more easier. So you understand how to see this in real time, through your doppelganger, through your provisions. Okay? So you can see yourself in 4 different angles, all in one flux of set lines of operation itself. Okay? It puts you in process of position to its operation system. Okay? Go slow, speed it up, slow down. So you're never going in the opposite direction. You're always going forward. Okay? But the optical illusion looks like you're going backwards. Looks like you're going forward, but you're always going forward. But the optical illusion makes you look like you're actually seeing these, that's depicting your system of its perception itself that you're modifying through the optical illusion that precedes everything of its power of recognition into the mind of conception itself. Okay? See, it rotates going around, rotates and circulates in the same direction. Every line is going in the same direction. But I'm just showing you how things can get out of order if you're not in line with yourself. So that means you're falling back, right? So one door is off position like this. So it's how you basically put yourself in interpretation, knowing that you're on the ground. Get off the ground, you get back on the horse, right? So one-dimensional door is off position in this setting. So we have to change the tether line rotation surface and time frame lines. Set position here. Door is on the ground. Starts off in that position. See? Okay. Okay, so the door is now in settings. It's ground system. Okay. It's flopped to the ground. Okay. You see? It's on the ground. It's got to pick itself back up. Because at off lines of all triangulation of flux, the process U indication setting off calculation. Okay? Everything's off balance now. So we have to modify all our line lengths into one line rotation of one travel, one direction, one location, one settings. All through pi. Okay? It's really trippy when you look at it in different angles, right? But that's a person that's out of line, right? Right there, right? Oops, fell down. Here's the door handle. But look at the platform now you're creating. So you can't make mistakes. It looks like a mistake, but it really isn't. It's just you're not identifying how to put yourself back in line with everything else. That process everything that puts you in positions of momentum, of travel. Okay? It's just a different angle that you see of truth, of modification. There you are, top of the line of the door. Right? So it's really interesting how you see this information setting. Okay? And then you see it rotate all together. Back information of travel. So all you're doing is you're recorrecting the direction timeline in your system. Because you never fell off the horse. You know? It's your ego thinks that you fell off the horse. That's what's even more crazy, right? So it's amazing how you see it on all different platforms that set travel. Okay? And there you are. Right there. In the game. So it's knowing how to construct yourself first inside so you can master yourself outside projection itself. Okay? See how the drawing gets complicated, but it's a lot more fun when you start to recognize. Okay? So I'm trying to get you guys to understand these things, what you need to process yourself through, because you can't make mistakes because it's already set and done in this equation. All formation. See? Look at that. Different angle. Okay? And now you're bringing yourself in again at another level. It's that position of operation. Okay? So that position here, you're the observer, seeing everything that you monitor yourself in set lines of travel. Okay? That process, that position here, that's monitoring your system that you brought in through travel communication. Okay, the roots, the routers, directing line grounds of your bridging. Okay? And then you bridge it here. Now it's inside the door. Okay, but every time you have to go through that, you have to go through bridging. Okay, and travel. From this angle to that angle. Okay? And now you're seeing everything inside the actual building. So it's really trippy as you see it at all different levels of travel, of direction, of location. But you're always seeing yourself all different levels, all at once, in recognition. Okay? So you're always going to see yourself grounded, powers, atmospheres, and set lines of operation itself. Okay? But you look at aspects of you in set position on travel and set calculation. Okay? And this goes on and on and on and on, every second, every minute, every hour. So wherever your body goes, you're creating structure. Okay? Whatever you're doing, you're creating structure. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. You have to modify what you are doing. It's process, engaging, forming, and shaping everything at a line position, creating a simulation every time you walk, every time you talk, every time you see things, every time you eat, every time you drink, every time you dress, every time you open up a door, every time you drive a car. You're creating schematics of a drawing that's modified already, set in the mind that processes you in position of binary so you can codify your set location and encryption. All set lines of operation. Look how powerful it is. Look at that drawing. Oh yeah. Okay? Very powerful when you know what you're doing, right? And where's it all coming from? You already know that. Inside the eye. Okay? Movement is everything through momentum, and then you recognize what's really going on when you start processing, gauging, and changing the shapes, to change the trajectory. It's changing all communication, the spectrum of light, of travel, accelerating, mocking, interstellar mode, hybrid drive. And that process, that position, location, and travel, as it goes faster and faster in that position, neutral directory. But you see it in all different angles of platforms of communication. Okay? That's what you have to process too. 4 different angles, all in setting. Okay? And again, you can change the platform. This is just one box frame. Okay? This is what you got to control because it changes everything through its anomaly. Right? So now I'm changing the structure of the building. Now I'm changing the platform's set position of operation. See? Now it's changing the platform. Now I'm changing the direct location of this platform itself, of rotation. Okay? Now I'm changing the schematics, change the tether and the attachment location setting of sonar. It's operation system and sequence location of panel. That position lines the settings all through set position to ceiling of operation. Okay? So it's getting a lot more complicated now, right? But again, start small, get in position locations, travel, operation system, right? Work with that setting to the next line of communication. Okay? All right? So it's really trippy when you see it in all different angles, right? Through the simulation itself. Okay? Skyline. Okay? Now, color is extremely important to the modification grounds. But it's amazing. First, look at what you draw in schematics of black and white. But as it's traveling, wow, it's going faster and faster each time tablet. It changes the time centers and location system that you modify of operation setting. Okay? So that's a building, and that's another building. Building here, building down that way, right? And what do we have in platform? The doors, all right? Okay, so, and you have another door here, an upswing location, right there, in traction. Okay? So it's amazing how you come in processing levels, keep talking through that information system that processes you, what you're doing in travel of communication. Okay? And you can see it on this angle to a system of travel. Okay? But it's knowing the longitude and latitude, guys. It's about understanding the angle that you're doing this, right? So it's about seeing beyond. It's all about understanding how to see close up and far at the same time. And that's what you're going to be provisioned of 12 and 24. So your eyes are going to go. You got to get bounce with it. Your eyes are going to vibrate. So everything is accountability, how you process everything that you see in travel that puts you in position lines of balance of communication. Okay? And this is just black and white. Now when you add color, whoa, it gets a lot more fun. All right, so we're working block centers of square roots, chop point communication lines and signals. Okay? You're bringing in color now, right? Just connecting in one box frame, just changing all different angles every single time. Formation. Okay? Color just brings it out. You guys already know that already, so I'm just showing you how powerful what you can do in travel once you recognize what's going on with your system. Okay? I know, you guys are mind blown. So it's incredible what you can do as you see the simulation of itself. Different colors and lines and settings of operation itself. So in that position, there's the ceiling. Ceiling on that angle, going that way. Right? So everything I'm doing is modifying, it's changing, I'm changing it, but it can change itself, which means it's on its own system, which means I'm just the DOS. If I'm just the DOS, I'm just standby looking at what's in that position is actually its own program, its own system, moving its own operation of face recognition. See? Face recognition. It's always a face there. But to see it in all different angles gets you a better understanding how to process it, different line settings. Okay? So it's incredible what you can do in force recognition. You can line signals and set calculation. Okay? Work with the different colors. Get schematic. Process that line direct lines. Out signal location your systems all through travel. That process you an indication set calculation. All right? So you're bringing it out now, a panel operation. Okay? Okay, so when you bring out the color, it just, you can even change the color too in directions of location. So color just brings out the more modification of its matrix. Matrix mind alterates the settings, change the states of mind and your position, location of travel. So it just really punches it out of operation system and travel calculation. Okay? That's how you to really understand how to see the coordinates of your eyes of balance of communication itself. Okay, so you work with that setting through its operation. Okay, and I can just basically go into white line. White line grid lines and operation lines of signals. In position, change the structure of division of location in a webbing system and high lines of calculation. Changing new schematics to new time frame and travel. Okay, so there's so many things that you can do in operation system that's constantly expanding its operation of itself and travel. That you bring in of operation setting to simulation. Okay. So just know exactly what you're doing. Your webbings, your grounds, your operation settings, all through your system. Okay. And work with that at all different angles in that position. Get creative in modification. All right. Now, what is it turning into? The actual Earth itself. The Earth. Now, it doesn't have to be green. It doesn't have to be blue. It can be any color you want it to be, but it's process that you go through lines, position, location, because it's already done through its creating, but we'll go with the basics. Now, go through the body frame. Okay, process line directions. Earth tones. Modification lines, forestry locations of travel. Okay, country line, ground centers of sequence. Plotted operation lines, outset lines of travel communication. Coming to its Earth or rotation. Great. Now again in a brown, which is a core conversion that modifies everything to its motherboard of operation itself. Core vision lines of travel of direct locations. Earth tones, process lines and modification lines, high set position lines, pixelation tones, operation sequence, and plot location. Okay? Coming to your Earth. Blue line is the process of the water. Water converts lines, high direct lines of rivers or streams, and location of lakes, and location of oceans and travel. Line signaling, ground centers. Remember, it's all light, shades, and shadows. Nothing is marked in screen location and setting. Outline signals. Come into your imagination what you're doing in travel communication. It converts the settings off the set position operations, set lines of travel. And that position to its settings, set positions calculation. Okay? Your Earth calculation lines and grounds. Okay, your Earth. Oh yeah. All right. Let's signify lines. Bring more Earth tone. It's amazing how I turn this into the Earth. You saw the schematic of the drawing. It's simulation. Now it's the Earth now. So it's constantly growing and expanding itself, its operation of its system. And you can do it on all different angles too, inside lines of rotation. Okay? So everything's light, shades, and shadows. Nothing is marked outside. No lines of signals. So everything is modification sitting in plasma. All right, so we process that position. Okay, then we bring in our security line defense lines, which is vortex streaming. come in position lines of kaleidoscope, communication lines of tango tango foxtrot, calculate line connections in all line positions, measure and scale of communication, center travels, directing ground centers in position of security panels, jump scaring. Okay, set jump scars, jump from here to here, jump from here to there, and travel communication. All right. So you got 2 lines, center line connection setting portal sequence, process and position location lines, make it 3 lines of signal. So you got 3 lines and set lines of travel communication. All right. So it's really interesting when you see that through the seconds, minutes, and hours. So you could change platforms and all direct lines. So you got 1 indication line here, 2 line signals, 3 lines of grounds of travel communication. Change the conversion time frame and pi generation screen location. That process lines, all direct location of setting of sonar and set position of operation. Set converting here, time clock line centers, converting line operation set and lines of signals, in through process set lines, and travels of communication setting. Sonar, echo, and position of flight. Travels point lines graph and position operation signals. Grounding centers, echo, sonar, and 42 lights and 42 lines of travel of position of operation. Signify, high direct line signals into modification broadcasting. Levels of travel, pixelation grounds, and location setting, conception location of mind itself, through the eyes. Operation signals, cross angles, 45 flux lines of angles, the travel communications, structural lines of vision. Center calculation lines, wires of indication lines, calculation lines, broadcasting to reception lines on signal. Your windows. Those are your TV broadcast lines of communication. Right there, boom. So it's outside looking in the earth. There's your earth, there's a fencing right line position. So the earth is outside, you're looking from inside. Through the aspect projection of yourself, all through operation. Okay? So it's amazing things that you can do in your mind of communication. It's just just keep creating and stop. You don't stop. You just change the flux. Okay? So it's amazing what you do in your mind of imagination. Okay, guys? And you can see it in all different levels of latitude and longitude, your gauging information system. See Earth and so many lines rotation of travel. Okay? Process in that position. There it is. Stance precedes everything. There's your location. X marks the spot. Right there. Boom. Right? There it is right there. There's your location, right? Okay, you set a jump scar. Boop, in the center of property of its own design line. Film strip line connection setting. X marks the spot. Okay? Move on to next travel and that line center location direction. So you can go there anytime you want. Right? So that puts position lines of travel of indicates lines of next flux of communication. So it's a lot of things you can do in your earth line rotations once you understand how to use the earth and rotation lines of setting, circulation, rotation of the system, all through its windows, all through its frames. Okay, in calculation. All right. So it's amazing how you change everything, right? From structure design to this and set position rotation. Okay. All through settings, all through platforms in your simulation. Okay? Understand? It doesn't matter how you look at it, because the process you that's already done everything through its creation. Okay? Face recognition. The eye is right there. All right? Good. I think we'll stop there. All right? All right, DQ on question lines. We'll go on classification A, level B. Classification A, level B. See you there.